today some common misconceptions with eating disorders. And let's just dive right in. So number one, a really common misconception or thought about eating disorders that's not true is that eating disorders are a choice. Now, people did not choose to have an eating disorder. That is not true. There is so much research out there to show how eating disorders impact the brain, how the brain kind of develops in order that that person may be more likely to have an eating disorder. There's also a lot of research to show that there's many biological and environmental factors that impact individuals that can result in eating disorders. They are not a choice. And on that same note, someone with an eating disorder, it's not easy for them to just make a choice to be like, okay, well, I'm going to eat now, or I'm going to stop binging now, or whatever it might be, right? Now, yes, working towards recovery can be a choice because you have to make that choice to seek that team or go to treatment or whatever it might be. But having an eating disorder is not a choice. And that's something that we have to move away from thinking because that really invalidates someone who is battling an eating disorder. Now, number two, and I've kind of mentioned this one in other videos before, is that eating disorders present at a certain weight, meaning that someone who's anorexic is obviously going to be in a smaller body, or someone who's a binge eater is obviously going to be in a larger body. That's not true. There is no specific weight that someone who's anorexic or bulimic or binge or as a binge eater has to be. Or, there's plenty of situations, and I've done videos on this recently, where someone is in a larger body but is anorexic, or someone is binge eating but is in a smaller body. We have to move away from this idea that there's a certain weight that dictates an eating disorder because that is not true. And coming back to that kind of invalidating, it invalidates the severity of that person's illness if we're tying it to a weight. Now, number three is that strict rules about food, meaning, I only eat this, and this, or I don't eat X, Y, and Z, and fad diets are not a problem. That is not true. Strict rules about food and fad diets are a problem, right? And the reason being is because they're a slippery slope into disordered eating. Now, I know I talked about this in my most recent video, but it's really important to bring up again because so many people are like, oh, it's great. She's cutting out all sugar and carbs. That's healthy. It's not. That is a slippery slope into getting obsessed with food, leading into orthorexia, and then orthorexia often progresses into other eating disorders. Now, I realize that not every single human being who's starting a diet or cutting out sugar or whatever is going to end up with an eating disorder. But again, it's one of those things where you're playing with fire. So we do have to take those strict diet rules and fad diets seriously to prevent the potential fallout of that person spiraling into disordered eating or a full-blown eating disorder. Number four is purging is only self-induced vomiting. Now, I know this one is a little bit specific, but this one's really important to note because purging can actually be when someone is even over-exercising, abusing laxatives, taking diet pills, or using any sort of compensatory behavior for the calories that they ate. So if someone, let's say, ate lunch and then feels like they have to do something to get rid of those calories, again, yes, that could be vomiting, but it could be a slew of other things that they're trying to make up those calories that they ate. All of that would actually be classified as a form of purging. Now, the last one, and number five, and this one kind of ties in with some ones that I mentioned earlier, but I did want to point it out, is that all eating disorders fit into a perfect category, meaning anorexics don't binge eaters don't restrict, etc., etc. That's not true. Actually, what's unfortunate about eating disorders is oftentimes there's a lot of overlap between all of them, meaning in many cases, yes, anorexics, for the most part, they restrict their intake. That's the definition of anorexia, right? But that doesn't mean that they haven't binged or even purged or over-exercised. In a similar situation with binge eaters, that doesn't mean that all they do is binge eat all of the time. Actually, in most cases, binge eaters restrict their calories all day and then binge at night. Now, the thing that's important and the reason why I wanted to bring this up in general is because this overlap is a really important piece to note because in a lot of instances, eating disorders get lumped into a category, and so people forget that there's other things that that person might be dealing with. So for example, using the binge eater, right? Let's say they're restricting their intake all day and then they're binging at night. what someone might say to that person is like, oh, well, what do you mean? I never see you eat. Or like, we just went to lunch today and you had a salad. Those are the types of things that help hide that eating disorder, because again, they're using lots of different pieces from all of the eating disorders, right? So there's some overlap there, and that's important in learning about eating disorders and how to treat eating disorders. So I wanted to bring up these 5 things again because I think they're very common misconceptions and they're not true about eating disorders, and it's important that we try to learn and educate ourselves so that we better understand how to work with individuals with eating disorders and even understand better what maybe our family, friends, loved ones, etc. might be going through. Guys, thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe.